civil rights activist slash civil rights pro-activist. I'm actually out there filming the police, actually having one-on-ones, actually in its rawest moments. So, with all due respect, I do rebuttal that statement because I'm actually out there, and they don't trust me. A lot of these police officers don't even know basic law, don't even know the Constitution, don't even know their own oath. Just being honest with you, I have a YouTube page, and it'll display it all right there. These officers are absolutely out of control, and I haven't really seen too much change. Now, with that being said, before we even get to the officers, what are we doing about just the basic 911 calls as far as the dispatch? And why I'm bringing that up, because there was obviously a huge disconnect with the whole Elijah McClain situation, where the young man who called in to dispatch clearly stated that this person didn't have a weapon, he only had a mask, which unfortunately we were just all wearing not too long ago, am I correct?
Yes.
So what is the training for dispatch as far as constitutional law, just procedure on that particular part as far as actual crime being committed, because there was no crime being committed. His Fourth Amendment right was violated and he lost his life. So what are we doing to educate dispatchers to make sure that they send these officers to proper calls? And not only that, asking the right questions to determine if a crime has been broken.
So I'll let Chris speak to it in a second, but a couple things implicated there. Number one is the Fourth Amendment, and the consent decree definitely covers the Fourth Amendment, right? So we will be looking at the legality of stops and what leads up to a stop, frisks, searches, and suspicious persons, and where a call of a suspicious person fits into that range of Fourth Amendment privilege for the police. There were changes, and I can't recite them by chapter and verse here now.
As far as dispatch?
There were changes to policy and procedures relative to suspicious persons after the Elijah McClain incident. And Chris, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So,
Well, before you start, because there's a difference between suspicious person and suspicious behavior, correct? So is that actually being taught, and not only that, reasonable articulable suspicion, RAS, a little bit lower than probable cause, of a crime actually being committed? Is that being taught? Go ahead.
thank you for the question. The answer is yes. So, one of the things, positive change that has happened is suspicious behavior is based on the individual, right? Or suspicious person or activity, or whatever we want to phrase that is. You might think one thing suspicious, I might think something else. Everybody in this room has a different idea of what that is based on our own personal experiences, biases, and those types of things. So what we've now asked our officers to do is, we may get a call that some activity or some behavior is suspicious, but I don't know what that caller is. I don't know what they're basing that on. I don't know what biases they may have on why they think that person should or shouldn't be there, or shouldn't be doing what they are or aren't doing. And so our officers are now mandated, when we get a call like that, is, first of all, to your point, Aurora 911, he's asking specific questions about what exactly is it, so it's articulable and not just a feeling or based on a bias. But also, when we get there, if we in fact respond, we make an assessment of our own on whether or not we think that there's anything to that. Now, granted, we got to be cognizant and aware of our own individual biases and experiences as well when we make that assessment, but we need to validate that call and that information that we have. I can't speak specifically to Aurora 911's training with regard to search and seizure and constitutionality. They're a separate division from the police department.
I heard that you're not over that anymore.
Correct. So I don't know what their current training protocols are with regard to that. So that would be a question that I'm unfortunately unable to answer right now.
I would encourage you to try to get that information.
I appreciate that. It does directly impact what we do and how we do it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So we will certainly be looking at that.
Happening instead of just reasonable suspicion, or I'm sorry, suspicious person or suspicious behavior.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I want to try to also say that we got quite a few people that want to ask questions, so if we can limit it to one question, but I already know your passion, brother. I already know your passion. With that, if we can limit it to one question, because there's still people online who want to ask questions as well. Topaz, then Pastor Nelson. Pastor Topaz, sorry.
No problem. Good evening. I am Topaz McBride, and as a mental health professional, first of all, I definitely want to second everything that has been stated with regard to prioritizing what you're doing with mental health. I'm disappointed to hear, however, that that's not something that's taken into consideration when an officer is being looked at for promotion. That really is disturbing to me. Not only that, but it seems to me that the state of one's mental health should also be taken into consideration when they're being asked to respond to a call. Because there are certain calls that certain individuals may not necessarily be qualified to respond to effectively, depending on where they themselves are with regard to their own ability to regulate. And if indeed what I'm hearing this young man say is accurate with regard to the training that's not happening from his observation and his direct witness, that is really scary to me. So that, I just wanted to make that comment. But my question is, as someone who was a part of the task force that invested lots of hours, I don't even know how many hours we put in. There are a couple of people in the space who were part of that task force that put together a lot of this stuff already, of what this group is now redoing. And so my question is, what happened to what we already did? We're reinventing the wheel in a sense. There's some new things that could be added to it, but what happened to the work, to the hours, the free hours we put in as a task force for almost a year? What happened to that information? Because so much of what I'm hearing in this space is redundant to what we already did.
So I am unaware of the work of the task force that you're referring to, as far as I know. Maybe, Reed, do you want to talk a little bit about that task force?
Yes. Well, Omar, you were on the task force. Why don't you speak to it?
I think you bring up a good question. I think we have the task force that was put together committed a lot of hours to some of the things that we're talking about today. But I also would like to say that out of that task force is one of the reasons why we have the consent decree. There's also one of the reasons why we have an independent monitor, which was one of the requests. But at the same time, there's a whole lot more of those recommendations that we need to address. So if you haven't heard about it, then we need to make sure you get those recommendations and maybe even talk to some of those members in the task force so that there's a complete full circle of what shouldn't be repeated in some of the work that's been done. And a lot of community members have already spoken to some of these issues.
Yep.
And let me add, there were a number of other reports as well. I mean, in 21, see, I was getting those numbers and letters mixed up. And a couple of other things as well. And I think it is important that we make sure that all of that homework, all of that pain and suffering goes to good use, in this process as well. Thank you, Topaz.
I think they're building blocks. And what I hope to do, what the team hopes to do, is to build on what has been done. I know about those reports. I apologize for not knowing about the task force, but certainly I want to learn about it and make sure that we are building on the work that, the good work that you all did. And I am certain that there is a lot of commonality between the work that you did do and what is going on with the consent decree and how we will be doing our work going forward. And hopefully some of the members of that task force will join the Community Advisory Council. I mean, obviously Omar is chairing that council, so we'll get that congruity there.
Thank you.
Eric Nelson, Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance. Pastor Topaz's question directly leads into my question, piggybacking off of hers. From what I can tell and from what I can see, there's definitely a communication breakdown within our city. I would hope that we could immediately address that. But just to hear some of the concerns from the citizens that have been happening, I'm heartbroken by it because I had no idea. With that being said, all roads lead right back to our city manager. And God knows, Jim, I hate to just put you on the spot, but however you can handle this. Can you speak to a little bit of the timeline, the implementation of the process of what's already been put in place in terms of the previous committee to what you're hearing now? Can we speak to like how soon that's going to happen?
The previous committee, did you say?
Yes. The committee that was put in place, that Pastor Topaz just mentioned. Yes.
Right. Yeah, and I think to Pastor Reed's comment, over the course of the last probably 15 months, we've had the task force, we've had the Elijah McClain investigation, we've had 21CP, we've had the patterns and practice from the Attorney General's office, which culminated in the consent decree. We've had the investigation of the Attorney General's grand jury investigation into Elijah McClain. And with all of those things feeding into really the direction we need to go. And so I think we were hesitant to get ahead of ourselves, knowing, for example, with the Elijah McClain investigations, there were concrete recommendations as a part of that, as a part of the 21CP, the patterns of practice, and the task force. We have all these things coming together, and really what we need to be doing is sorting through those, and there's overlap, and then there are pieces where there's no overlap that we have to kind of knit together and kind of build this matrix of things that we need to do, things we need to implement in the department. Each one took a bit of a different lens in looking at the police department and to some extent the fire department. So it's a lot to weave together, but we're committed to doing that.
So follow up, so what I'm hearing, you're saying within the first 90 days, you'll have a more concrete idea of what will be implemented sooner than later?
Well, when did the clock start? I think if we said we start the clock today and we come up with that matrix, that document, I think that's doable.
Gotcha. Thank you.